Hey folks, Salty Seaman here with another Tales from the Fleet. I'm going to pick up right after Ulchi Focus Lens 1996. Coming back into Homeport. I told the homecoming story, all that fun stuff. So now let's get into in my first really big import period, and one of the bigger ones I had on the Blue Ridge. Fall 96 SRA, Ships Repair Availability. That's what it stands for. And basically what it means is when you're stationed in Japan, a lot of little Japanese guys run on your ship and fix a bunch of crap. Plus people like the sailors from the Frank Cable out of Guam, among other groups, come on. And they fix a lot of stuff. And, basically for a ship as old as the Blue Ridge was, back in 1996, keep in mind the ship is still in service as the oldest ship currently active, and they just went through like about a 2-year overhaul to keep that ship for the foreseeable future. We were seeing this stuff back in 1996, and it's for a kid like me, 19 years old, just barely got my feet wet. I came in March. Now it's September through about early December. One of the longer import periods the Blue Ridge would get during my time there, and it was a big life changer for me. About any other period I could point to in terms of my understanding of how the Navy worked, and just me as a man, as a sailor, as a person, kind of coming out of my shell. This is the period. This is where 19 to 20-year-old me would really kind of I think blossom in certain ways, and in other ways, like I made some wrong mistakes, some wrong choices in life, but we'll get to them as we get to them. Now, one of the bigger things that happened here was we had to move out of our berthing. Our berthing, the old admin berthing. If there's anyone listening here, some of my old Blue Ridge shipmates, I'm going to post this to our Facebook page. Would remember between the mess decks and the master at arms shack was the old admin slash part of supply master at arms berthing, and they were redoing the mess decks, and it was a big overhaul in terms of we were one of the, not the first, but we were one of the earlier ones to change the tile out of the mess decks, and later on different parts of the ship, from tile that had to be stripped and waxed to a permanent shiny coat that only needed mopping and sweeping. It's called PRC, and I do not remember what that stands for, but it's basically a perma wax kind of thing. So where are you putting us? Well, we have an empty berthing right below the deck berthing. That's called the troop berthing. That's where we put Marines when they came on board for various exercises. And we did not have to give up our locker space. We could keep stuff in there. We could still go back and use our lockers in there. We just could not sleep in there due to the dust and noise and all whatnot. It was kind of cool at the time. When we first started, it was like, okay, we got to move. It's a pain in the ass. But it was like, okay, well, now we've doubled our locker space, at least for a few months, which is always nice. Little did we know like where this would end up going. And it was, I'll get to it as I get to it. But so we moved over to the aft end of the ship into below deck berthing and troop berthing. And it's a berthing. The locker situation was a little different. It's like the top bunks didn't have coffins. They were people who were on the top bunks got larger secondary lockers. Not only the stand-up lockers we normally have, but they would get also a secondary double-chested locker, since they didn't have the coffin, which is not always like the greatest way to do it, because it's easier to go through something that's horizontal vice vertical, and now you're dealing with two vertical lockers. But again, we could still go back and that's what we did. We just used all the space we had, and it was kind of cool. And also, we get, a lot of people get pulled for different jobs here. It's like, this is an import period. So, there were things like, Fox Division and Rehab Division going on the ship. Now, Fox Division, I can't remember if on another one I talked about it, and I will have more feature with this because I went through Fox twice and I spent a little bit of time in rehab. But overall, it's like these are, Fox Division was guys who watched the welders, whether it was a shipboard welder, a front cable welder, or more likely what we were doing. We're watching the Japanese welders, making sure shit didn't catch on fire, either right next to them or on the other side of they're working on a bulkhead or a deck or a overhead, whatever. You'd be on the other side to make sure shit wasn't catching on fire. But I'm not there yet. Like I still work in my office. And in fact, a weird thing happened here is where I kind of got skipped. They sent a guy I talked about, Anthony Krantz. He came in. He got sent cranking before I did, and I think Hall did as well. And I told the story earlier when I did my mess cranking thing about how I ended up going when I went into mess cranking. But yeah, I got left in the office, and it was definitely a down period. My YN1 league came back in. I think at the time it was her, YN2 Tate, YN3 Hassler, YN3 Tassie, YNSN, soon to be YN3 Yabara. She's still a good friend of mine on Facebook. Bockhorst, my best friend to this day. And I think Hall had gone down to be the CMC yeoman. At some point, he'd lose that job. I think he got caught looking at porn on the burgeoning internet, and he lost that job. I can't remember quite exactly. Yabara had been the engineering yeoman. I said, Brett had been the deck yeoman before, and all, basically we all got moved up. Jackie Ward was a YN3, but he was permanently T80 elsewhere. He would be, I don't know if he was working in personnel at this point. I think he was just permanently on a rehab team. Rehab is, it's not Alcoholics Anonymous. It is, help people who are the true constructionists who rebuild stuff on the ship. You have this team of sailors on board. Kind of, it's like shit work on a construction site, and that's kind of I've dealt in a little bit, but overall, it was it's a hard job, but certain people like really take to it, like Jackie did. He was that's why he was like they always requested him on rehab. He was for an administration guy, he was a good guy at that kind of work and a good leader. I think at that point that's where he met my friend Roth, who would become a more important person to me later in the next year. But I think that's how I first met him, was through Jackie, who said, "Hey, Gabe, you gotta check this new guy out. He's fucking crazy. He'll do anything you tell him." And it was just Roth was just he would just do crazy shit, and it was like kind of my first meeting of a guy who'd become like one of my really close friends over the years. And meanwhile, I'm still working in the office. Not a lot to talk about on that end, other than is I'm talking about like as the best way I can describe it is, as these months went on, it felt like you're being surrounded by construction work, and there was also a major general quarters kind of drill exercise called a light off assessment. How well we could, in a case of a main space fire, we could light off the old style OBAs, oxygen breathing apparatuses. Different what they have now, which is SCBA, which is the same thing firefighters use. But back then we had this big, it looked like a Darth Vader's chest. You literally wore it on your front. You stuck in a canister of oxygen, and you had this big old like Darth Vaderish mask on. It was crazy. And, we drilled the shit out of it, and that would also become part of the problems of, living and working on the ship, going through all this rehabilitation, going through this light off assessment, and then how it would just slowly, this kind of like, just everything would just kind of curve in on you to how we're living. But, the early days of it, I was, I did my job and pretty much avoided anything else. I was messaged the watch qual by that point. I ended up being Dink in 3M, Material Maintenance Management. Just I just wasn't paying attention. I was just like, whatever. If they really need me to get on it, I'll go do it. But eventually, at some point, I ended up dink and had to stay for EMI until I passed the test and got all my signatures, which didn't take too long. How I never got hit for being basic DC dink, because I know I did not get my basic damage control quals until January, which is way past when I should have had my quals. But they did things differently back then. Now they try to, my past other ships, they try to get you basic damage control qual to be a basic firefighter or whatnot, whatever your job was, basically an NDOC. And back then they didn't. You just kind of dick around on it forever, and if no one calls you on it, no one calls you on it. But other than that, it was working in the office. It was really learning these people's personalities, and me going out. I made other friends. I mentioned my friend Gordon Lee. That was a period like I really hung out with him really hardcore. Me and him were just boys. Because I was a guy. I was friends with Brett and Mike and other people and Jackie. But I would say during that period, 80% of my time I was hanging out with this guy Gordon. I mentioned before he was an OS. Interesting cat. Just we were both just on the same length musically, and just kind of how we chilled together. And we hung out a lot. It was a really interesting time. I was going out more. Coming from the rural teenager living in Arkansas. I was pretty shy, and I hadn't opened myself up. It was like, and some people never get past that. People who have the ability to become a more outgoing, personable person, I don't think ever get that. I did. I think that period was a lot for me, and it was just trial and error, and it was a lot of being out on the bar area, just about every night. I mean, I never had money. Within 4 days of payday, I would spend like a crazy person, and end up really really scraping to get by for the next week and a half a lot of times. And then that was just part of the game. I think I was just part of being a 19-year-old. I made my first attempt at a off the ship Japanese girlfriend, punk rock chick with green hair. She was cute. I was just head over heels for her, and she kind of liked me, but it was always like, kind of want to date you, but I think I was just such a fucking big ass dork at the time, and it was just hard for she just couldn't get over the awkwardness I was still trying to get through at the time, so we never ended up working out. But one of the nights we were going to have one of our very, very few dates, there was a club on the Haunch called the Pumpkins, which did local small-time bands, usually the punk rock or metal variety. I was there that one night. I was definitely with Gordon that night. I remember seeing and a mosh pit broke out. And there's not a lot of mosh pits in Japan. If you're a heavy music fan and you're used to that, Japan doesn't do it very often. But in this place, we were doing it, and I'm in the pit. I'm slaying around as Japanese kids, a bunch of sailors, maybe half and half, and I kind of got thrown out, and I slammed into a monitor, and hit me right in the corner of my eye, my right eye, around the eyebrow line, and I just got busted open like really bad, and it was like. I saw stars, I was hurting, and I just kind of shook it off, and I went back to, doing my thing in the pit, and then like Gordon spotted me, and he was like, dude, what the fuck's going on, man? You're bleeding like a stuck pig. And I'm like, I touched my face, and I realized like, oh my God, that's the heat I've been feeling is this, and I go in the bathroom, look in the mirror, and I see this huge fucking cut down the side of my eyebrow. And I'm like, ah, fuck, that needs stitches. I should go back to the ship. I'm 19. The drinking age is 20. Even though I'm not drunk at all at this point, but I've had alcohol, and that's going to be a question. And if I admit to it, officially I'm fucking done. If I lie about it and they prove otherwise, I'm, same thing. So it's just like, I just make the decision, nope, not going to deal with it. And yeah, I still have that scar to this day. You look at the right side of my eyebrow on my videos, you'll see a nice little red scar coming off the downside of the right brow. And in fact, the punk rock girl I was trying to date, she we went out like right after that. And she's just looking at this fucking dorky kid, just like who now has a giant gash in his face, and she's like she had band-aids on her. God bless women sometimes who just carry, like, I would never think to carry band-aids on me. She had one, and I got the bleeding to stop and had the band-aid on. I think it was like a Friday night, so like we were out till whenever. I think I don't know if I had duty the next day or I was just hanging out on the ship the next morning, but I ran to the ship's dock on the smoking spots, and she was a smoker. She was a cool doc. I can't remember her name. When I post this to the Facebook page, anyone can remember the middle-aged woman who was the ship's dock around '96. She was cool people. And she was on duty that night when I came, she would not have even questioned me about any alcohol or whatever. She would just stitch me up. But I saw her the next morning smoking, and I was like, "Hey doc, is there anything you can do with this?" And she's like, "When did it happen?" I said, "About 10:30 last night." She's like, "Oh, way too late. Yeah, you're just gonna have a scar. Should have came in." I was like, "Well, I didn't." So I still have that scar to this day. But eventually those nights would lead me out to where I would finally, as Beavis and Butthead would say, score with a local Japanese woman. Actually, through a friend of a friend. The Trying to describe this, it was Brett. He was dating a girl, and he just kind of got tired of her, and they were broken off, but still kind of friends. And then he was like, she was asking him, was like, "Hey, do you know anybody else in the ship? Uh, you know, maybe a nice guy that maybe I could date." And he was like, "Yeah." And it was our friend Ted. And Brett was just kind of giving, just kind of making this hookup for Ted. Wanted to get her off his back, and two was like, "Hey, Ted's a nice guy. Here's a girl to mess around with. And it shouldn't be anybody you take, in his mind, nobody you should take seriously." They fell in love, got married, had kids, so that's how things work out. But she had a friend, very attractive woman, spoke very good English. I ran into the three of both of them. Ted was on duty, I think. Yeah, Ted was on duty. I was with Gordon. I ran into them in Buffalo's, and I ended up hooking up with that girl who also had an apartment, which was like gold because Japanese girls don't have apartments as a rule. They're young and single. They live at home. So that was like score. She ended up taking me home, and I think that really broke me out. Just in terms of having confidence in myself, having confidence in who I was. It's always an ongoing process when you were an awkward teen, and maybe you got picked on a little bit because you were the kid with the long hair or the kid who said weird shit. I always felt like I was just too weird, and everyone would. Hard to describe. I mean, the way, because the mindset I have now is like I'm a fairly charismatic, likable guy. I know this. I'm not bragging or stroking my ego here. I know what I am, and so it's weird looking me back on that now and like, oh wow, God, I was such a fucking dork. And I know tons of people have gone through this process. Some never finish it. But that was a big turning point for me. Other things, my friend Stacy Bryant, now Cecily, also a good friend of mine on Facebook. We hung out with her a lot. Some other guys. She was an OS also with. That's how I knew her from Gordon. A couple other OS guys whose names I just kind of forget at this point. I don't know whatever happened to them. But on the shipwise, we had. So we were in the deck berthing, and all of a sudden they start doing the LOA drills. These became a daily thing, and I mean daily. And they started at 6 a.m. and it was by duty. It was by originally just by duty section, and then they broke it down further and further. I'll get to that in a second. But originally it was like one of the way the drill worked, and it was like the same drill every time, which is I think hilarious. But yeah, they would come in like they had to fake out a hose for a a wall washer. I'm blanking on the term now. It was like in Fox Division, but in a firefighting situation, it was the guy who has to watch, feel the walls for heat, panting, warping, whatnot. If it needs to cool it down, he has to fake out a fire hose. And he was in our berthing, and he had to fake out our fire hose like at 6 o'clock in the morning when everyone's just starting to get up and move around. So that became a problem. So their solution was everyone needs to get the fuck out of the berthing at 6 o'clock, like every fucking day. I think originally it wasn't the weekends. Eventually it would become the weekends. So, but yeah, we had to like just every morning at 6 o'clock. It's an hour and a half before uh, uh, muster quarters, and we had to go out and get our asses up. As he's coming down in his full firefighting regalia, and we just a birthing of like 40 dudes just looking at this dude like fuck you. It's not his fault, He's no more his fault than it is ours. But it's just like, it was so gnarly. We just hated it, and then it just kept closing in. It's just this bubble of shit. Because like I said, it went to 3 section for the LOA light off. So whether or not you're on duty, every third day you had to do your part as in the LOA drill in the morning. So that fucking sucked. And then eventually that would turn into like the week leading up to the actual assessment. Like we were straight down to 3 section duty, and we're talking about import period. That was brutal. The head stopped working because they were doing work on some plumbing systems around there. So our plumbing went out, so we had to go shit, shower, shave, whatever down in the upstairs in the deck berthing. So that also sucks, especially when you come back late at night and you're ready to go to bed. And all of a sudden you got to piss, and you have to fucking traverse upstairs to go take a piss. And a lot of people were just going in the heads, and like they all stunk. They're just full of shit and piss from people who couldn't go upstairs. I won't lie. I think there might have been one drunk night I came home and I just pissed in a fucking water fountain. I'm not proud of it, but it happened. But even before that, like we lost the hot water, so it was like cold showers and then like no showers, other than have to go somewhere else. 3 section duty. We had a hurricane or a typhoon in the middle of that. I had a really bad Saturday morning duty day. I think again in my wild crazy days, like I'd been out that night before and got pretty lit. It might have been the night of the story I'm about to tell here after this, but regardless, at this point it was like we had a berthing barge. So there's other berthings that had gotten closed down, so they didn't get put in troop berthing on the ship like we did. They got put over on this barge that was tied up next to us. With the typhoon coming in, it had to be moved. Like it would be a danger with the wind and rain and all that. So I got put on line handlers to go handle that at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was like just hoping, like it was supposed to be like for a Saturday an easy duty day. I don't think I had like any watch, or if whatever watch I had was bullshit. Maybe it was lighting detail. I don't even. Have I described lighting detail? I think I did on one of the Russia videos. I think what lighting detail is. I think I might have had that, but I think they called lighting detail to come do. Lighting detail became like the bodies for anything else they had to do on a duty day, including moving a barge. And man, that fucking sucked, and I was in bad shape. But funny looking back on it now, but at the time I really hated it. Another time I was going out. It was me and Brett, and we met these 2 girls, and we had fun with them. And then a couple weeks later, I guess we were hanging out at my friend Bill's house. Bill, his wife, was from, I think he was first station. He was a PN2. His first duty station was up north in Misawa. That's where he met his wife at the time. I don't believe they're together anymore. But yeah, she did a lot of visits up there, and he would just with the kids. And so Bill's tower apartment on base became kind of party central for the rest of us because he just invited us over. And I was like, one night we were like me, Mike, Brett, and Bill, of course. And I think we were watching Taxi Driver, and we got fucking drunk on cheap beer. And Bill started bugging me and Brett about like, hey, why don't you guys bring some girls over? You guys know girls. You guys are hooking up all the time. I really wasn't at the time. I just started getting anywhere with the ladies, so to speak. And I know I think I've talked about this, with the ladies and stuff, but it was a big part of my life. I was 19 years old. So this was like a whole new thing for me, a new experience. So it was a big part of my life when I wasn't getting shit on the ship. Like I had these two lives. Like one of them I hated and one I fucking really liked, which was going out drinking, hanging out with my boys, meeting girls and whatnot. So we called those girls up, and sure enough, they were not too far nearby, and they came over, and we had this party, and we started playing drinking games with cards. And one scene I always get Brett always reminds me of. We're doing something. I had to take like so many chugs of beer, and I'm like having a hard time keeping it down, and everyone's just like looking at me like, and someone asked, Bill or Brett or Mike asked me, it's like, dude, are you okay? And all of a sudden, like, all the beer comes back, and it's not puke or bile yet. It's just still the straight, beer and suds. Just comes back up in my mouth, and I just, like, my cheeks pop out like chipmunks. And I hold up one finger, like, wait a moment. And then I put the finger to my mouth, and then the spew of the beer just comes around my finger, all on Bill's on carpet. And apparently that was really, really funny to watch. So that's another story I remember from that era. It's the whole, like, as we were counting down to, at this point, the LOA and the SRA, like we got ran out of our office a couple times because like they were doing rehabilitation work around us, and we would just get covered in dust, and it was like you just felt constantly dirty, and you didn't have your own head to clean up in, or if you did, it was like cold water. And you're getting up every 3 days to go do this stupid drill that you guys drilled a million fucking times. And I just couldn't get, like, why the fuck do we gotta do this too much? And you get stuck on weird watches, like I said, the PRC, I got put on a watch to make sure people didn't walk through it, which I thought was stupid because they had put up these giant heavy duty plastic, see-through, like transparent plastic tarps that were like heavy duty stapled or whatnot. If you wanted to walk through them, it would take you some time. It would be way quicker to go up a ladder well or go down a ladder well and go around. But that's, I got put on this watch, and they did, and I just got the word, being a dumb, stupid young seaman, I didn't think about, people said, like, yeah, it's like, you sit on a chair, just bring some books, I was like, okay, sounds good to me. So I think I ended up bringing some comic books with me. And when we moved to 3 section, I ended up Senior Chief Mayhew, who I think I've touched on a bit before, but she's definitely a bigger player in my life at this point on the ship. A few months from this, she was my enlisted section leader, and she caught me, and I was just dumbfounded. Like I was told to just sit here and read. She's like, you have to read like some actual Navy, blah 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 blah. And it's just like, if I was going to read anything, it was going to be like, watch qualifications or something. I don't know. So like, yeah, we hit it off really well to begin with. And when she eventually ended up, even despite being a radio man, ended up being the LCPO of the admin office, like we did not get along for the next year afterwards, but get a little ahead of myself. And I think I did touch on it on my mess cranking one, but yeah, that was kind of our first meeting really. And a few other things like the things didn't really go well for me at that point. But at the same time, I was having fun. I was being a young, just a 19-year-old kid, and I had so much fun in these 3 months, and I had so much bullshit happen at the same time. I kind of live in this like yin-yang world of desperation and awesomeness, and I started going to Roppongi, and we really formed this little clique of guys, Adam and Jay and Brett and Mike. And we were all like, really close and had so much fun. And the fun always ended the second he had to go back to the ship. It's about 30 minutes right here, so I think I'll call an end to SRA Fall 97. I already did the deployment and mess cranking that followed on this, so the next time we'll be picking up spring 97. That's all the Salty Seaman's got for now. I do love you, freaks. Peace.